Wise words on wealth from Proverbs, and we're going to be looking at three things: a proper perspective on money, a pleasing path for obtaining money, and thirdly, a perfect plan for using money. And so, first of all, we're looking at things that money cannot buy. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 19. Proverbs 19. And here's the first thing that money cannot buy. It says, Proverbs 19, verse 4, wealth adds many friends, but a poor man is separated from his friend. Now, it sounds like money actually can buy friendship in that verse, but Solomon is talking about, if you win the lottery, guess what? You have never had so many friends in your life. You've got so many friends, and they all would like just a little bit. I've got this project going, if you could help me just a little bit. But then when you've spent all the lottery, when it's all gone, and now you're in hock for $100,000 because you overspent, now what? Well, you don't have friends anymore. When you say, could you help me out a titch? I helped you, and it's, man, I'd love to, but I am just stuck, sorry. Well, money cannot buy genuine friendship. It just does not work. And the Bible is pretty clear on that. Notice also Proverbs 11 and verse 28. Proverbs 11 and verse 28. He who trusts in his riches will fall, but the righteous will flourish like the green leaf. There's something else that money can't buy, and that's security. Money cannot buy being safe from all harm. So, one of the things that I've heard of, I have trouble picturing it, but people who are ultra rich, multimillionaires, they build a giant mansion, and they fear for their lives. Sometimes most often they have bodyguards, but even with bodyguards and a fence and security cameras everywhere, they sometimes build what they call a safe room. And a safe room is like a stainless steel cube. And you can run inside there and push a button and a door closes, and if there's terrorists or murderers out there, they can't get in. You're sealed in there. And presumably, I don't know, I've never been in one, but presumably there's a phone that you can call and call 911, or something like that. But I've wondered what happens if, under the stress of running into your safe room and pushing the button, you have a heart attack and you fall down on the floor, and now you can't push the secret code to let the EMT in. So now your safe room is now your tomb. The reality is, even if you are the richest person alive, you cannot buy security. You can't. And if somebody trusts in his riches, they are trusting in something that not only could fail, it will fail. It's guaranteed. Just think of this last financial problem we went through from, 2008 to about 2016 or so, 8 years of financial trouble. Think of the millions, really the trillions of dollars of investments that were lost. Huge amounts of money that were lost because people had invested and then the stock markets crashed. And, that was, as I understand it, that was the worst financial downturn since the Great Depression of 1929. Wow. Well, money cannot buy security. You just can't find it. So here's something else that money cannot buy. In chapter 11 of Proverbs, go to verse 4. Proverbs 11 and verse 4. Riches do not profit in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death. Things that money cannot buy. Money cannot buy freedom from wrath. What's wrath? Anger, judgment. And probably in the background here's judgment of God. And a rich man, he may have Maybe he's got his own personal doctor for his health care, and maybe he's got bodyguards, and maybe he's got, whatever. Who was it? Howard Hughes. You ever hear of Howard Hughes? He was a germaphobe, and he had people that he hired to sanitize everything. They go around and dust and wipe down, and well, he died too. And money, even if you have a lot of money, you are not free from God's wrath. Someday, rich people, just like poor people, are going to stand in front of God for the final judgment. And God does not care how much money you have in your bank account. That is not something that he concerns himself with. And so, rich people, now they will be held accountable for what God has given them, actually. And poor people will be held accountable for what they've had to manage as well. So money cannot buy freedom from God's judgment. There are things that are better than money. We're still talking about a proper perspective on money. So go to Proverbs 20, Proverbs chapter 20. And here is something that's better than money, and I'm looking at verse 15. Here's what it says, Proverbs 20, verse 15. There is gold and an abundance of jewels, but the lips of knowledge are a more precious thing. And actually, Solomon says this several different times, several different ways in the book of Proverbs. Knowledge and wisdom are better than money. So, how often, if you're like me, you've probably been through periods of time where you've said, boy, $100 right now would really, really help out. Or, $1,000. I could fix this problem if I had $1,000. But you know what? We're still here. And all those problems that we faced, all those issues, the car going down, or the kids are sick, or, you're struggling to come up with money for the mortgage payment or whatever, we're still here. In other words, all those problems were not the end of the world for us. And what is more valuable than money is wisdom and knowledge, knowing how to handle life, knowing how to deal with issues. That's way more valuable than money. Notice also Proverbs 22 in verse 1. A good name is to be more desired than great wealth. Favor is better than silver and gold. What do you think Solomon means by that? A good name. Your reputation is more valuable than money. So my dad was not rich at all. After he died, we looked at some of his financial records, and we wondered how he did what he did. How did he do it? He took good care of Mom. He took good care of us kids. We never went hungry. We always had clothes to wear. But I tell you what, he got by on some pretty slim pickings. But one thing that Dad did have was a really good testimony. He had a good name. People respected him. People who were unbelievers and who knew Doc Brown, they respected him. People who were believers. And it's a sad thing when a Christian has a poor reputation. That's a very, very bad thing. Because how are you going to tell somebody about Christ? If they know you don't pay your bills, if they know that you gossip, if they know that you talk about people behind their back, how are you going to tell them about Jesus? Well, a good name is way more valuable than a fat bank account. Solomon says so. Notice also in 15, Proverbs 15. And in Proverbs 15, I'm going to look at verse 17. Better is a dish of vegetables where love is than a fattened ox served with hatred. We talked about this last week, I think, but what's going on here? And where's the money? I don't see any reference to money.
Love is the most important thing.
Okay, love is more important than a fattened ox. Now, what would that mean in that culture? Okay. So most people didn't kill a cow for every meal. In fact, you didn't have a lot of red meat. They ate a lot of wheat, a lot of barley, a lot of fruits and vegetables. They ate quite a bit of fish, but and some lamb and some goat. But that's more rare than other foods. So somebody who can have a fattened ox, he's got money. The picture here is of a very luxurious banquet, a huge spread. And Solomon is saying, you've got your pick. You can go into this room, and there's this fantastic banquet, this smorgasbord, everything you could possibly want to eat. It's like going to Amish country in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And you got, wow. But every time you look around at somebody's face, their face to you is one of hatred. I can't stand you. You can go to that room, the smorgasbord, or you can go to this other room, and what they have is hummus. What is hummus, anyways? I can never remember. There's tofu. All right, something else.
No,
There's
it's not tofu. It's beans. White
beans. Okay.
Garbanzo beans.
Okay, it's garbanzo beans. And what's tofu? What's that one? Is that bean sprouts? No?
I don't know.
Okay. Well,
We don't tofu. We don't.
yeah, I'm not crazy myself. Yeah, as you might be.
I do know it picks up the flavors of whatever you cook it with.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So we'll say this over here is salad. Okay. This is salad, and they don't even have the right kind of dressing. That they have some kind of weird dressing that you're supposed to enjoy, but nobody actually does. But when you go in that room, everybody's smiling. They like you. In fact, they love you. They're glad that you're there. And they'd like to have you sit down and just talk. So do you go to the smorgasbord and you get the really great food, but everybody there is just, their eyes are flaming daggers at you? Or do you go and have a little salad where people, their demeanor, their facial expression, we love you. We're glad you're here. Well, when you think about it for a minute, it's kind of an easy pick. There are some things that are better than luxury. There are things that are better than money. And one of them is friendship and love. Here's another one. Go to Proverbs 15 and verse 16. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure in turmoil with it. What's going on now?
Well, if you don't have a deal with the Lord, then you're not following the Lord and you're not a Christian.
Yeah, okay.
You just have a lot of money, but just troubles.
All right. So it's better to have just a little bit, but there's a reverence for God. There's a zeal for things of God. There's a godliness. There's joy in the things of the Lord. It's better to have that, Solomon says, than to have great treasure, but there's a lot of stirring up, a lot of conflict, a lot of turmoil going on all the time. And so the fear of the Lord is better than a lot of money. So here's a proper perspective on money. There are a lot of things that money simply cannot buy, and there are a lot of things that are better than money. So, money is not an idol. It is not a god. It is not to be worshipped. Money is a tool. It's something that you use to help with life, to glorify God. So here's a pleasing path for obtaining money. Go to Proverbs 10 and look please at verse 2. Proverbs 10 and verse 2. It says, ill-gotten gains do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. What does Solomon mean by ill-gotten gains? Yeah, so you got it by stealing or conniving or scheming or fraud or something. The way that you got it is not God-honoring. And Solomon says, ill-gotten gains do not profit. It may seem like it in the short run. That guy that went to prison for the Ponzi scheme, Madoff, remember him? Was billions of dollars, crazy numbers. And it sure does seem like in the short term, he made out pretty good. He bought a lot of stuff. He spent money like crazy. I guarantee you, when the end comes, when he meets his Maker, there will be a lot of regret. There will be a lot of sorrow. Ill-gotten gains, in the long run, are not a good idea.
But even with him, in the news, was saying like he had two sons. One died, I guess, of cancer, and the other one committed suicide.
Isn't that sad? What a sad thing. Yeah. What a sad thing. Yeah. Terrible. And so ill-gotten money is wicked. Not only that, but look in Proverbs chapter 6. We're still talking about the path, the means for obtaining money. And there is a right way to go about it. And here's part of it in Proverbs chapter 6, looking at verse 6. Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which, having no chief, officer, or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man. Pretty colorful picture, isn't it? Solomon is saying, he's talking to a sluggard. A sluggard is a lazy person. And he says, you need to take some lessons from the ant. The ant works hard. The ant prepares ahead of time, works in summer to get ready for winter. And in verse 9, how long will you lie down? So now the sluggard says, I think I'll just take a nap for a little bit. Now, I like a nap as well as the next person. But there's a time and a place to nap, and there's a time and a place to say, I'm gonna push through. I'm gonna keep on going. And in verse 10, here's what the lazy person says: a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands. It's he's folding his hands. He's going to just close his eyes for a few minutes. And here's what Solomon says to him, verse 11: your poverty will come in like a vagabond, like a beggar who is persistent, like a panhandler in New York City. They won't leave you alone. And even worse, and your need like an armed man. Somebody who comes in and holds a knife at your throat and says, give me what you got. And what's doing that here is your need. You've run out of food. You've run out of clothing. You've run out of money. And because you're lazy, you don't have it. And now you're in real desperate straits. Well, so the lesson is work hard. And Christians, of all people, ought to be the hardest workers on the planet, because we're not just working for a paycheck or for a boss. We're working for Jesus Christ. We're trying to honor him. Well, work hard. Not only that, but go to Proverbs 12 and look at verse 11. Proverbs 12 and the 11th verse. He who tills his land will have plenty of bread, but he who pursues worthless things lacks sense. Now, I think that there is room in a Christian's life for dreaming, for having big ideas and saying, I'd like to try something. I'd like to experiment. I think I could make a go of this. Sure. But there's also a lot of value in using what you have. So a guy has a piece of property, and he could be farming it, but instead he says, I think I'm gonna become a potter. I really like pottery. Okay, you can try that, but just remember, every month that you're not planting and weeding and tilling and harvesting the wheat that could be growing in your field, it's lying dormant, and that could be money in the bank. In other words, use what you have. And I think this is a principle that applies to talents and abilities as well as to physical property and money. It's okay to dream. It's okay to think about big ideas. I think God is honored when we use our creativity. But there is such a thing as using what you have. So, here's one other. This all leads to a proper philosophy of money, and let's go to 1 Timothy 6:9. 1 Timothy in the New Testament, chapter 6. 1 Timothy chapter 6, and we're going to be looking at verse 9. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge men into ruin and destruction. Now, I need to correct the translation. It says those who want to get rich. The word that's translated as want is really a much stronger word. It means those who decide. So this is an individual who has made the decision, I will be rich. I'm determined. Nothing is going to get in the way. I don't care what it takes. I don't care who I have to step on, what rules I have to break, who gets in my way and gets run over. I don't care. I am going to be rich. You sometimes see this with children from homes that didn't have a lot. You know what I mean? The parents maybe were a little poor. They didn't have fancy cars or a nice house, or they just kind of got by. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes the kids coming out of a home like that, they say, I am never going to go through that. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be, I'm going to be worth $25 million by the time I'm 50 years old. Now, is it wrong to set financial goals? No. It's a good idea. I mean, if you don't set a goal, what are you going to do? Just spend all your money? Well, of course, set a financial goal. But there should always be a little phrase, a little caveat, a little statement that we include in our plans. In fact, let me show you what it looks like. Go to James. The right attitude is in the book of James. And look at chapter 4. James chapter 4, verse 13, 4:13. Notice what James says about this. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and also do this or that. But as it is you boast in your arrogance, all such boasting is evil. So what's the problem with a guy who says, I'm going to go to Concord and I'm going to spend a year there and I'm going to get filthy rich? Leaving God out of the picture, saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make money and I'm going to be rich. There's nothing wrong with setting a goal. You should set a goal. Setting a goal is a good thing. But if you leave God out of it, you're setting yourself up for trouble. Because God might have other plans. God might say, actually, I'm sending you to Concord not to make money, but to be a witness for Christ. I've got other things I got going on here besides just you and your checkbook. And so there's nothing wrong with setting financial goals, and Christians ought to do that. We ought to be wise. We ought to be smart. But understand that deciding that you're going to be rich as the absolute goal of your life is not a good idea. That is not really something that God endorses. So let's look thirdly, quickly at a perfect plan for using money. Go back to Proverbs and go to chapter 22, Proverbs 22. And in Proverbs 22, I want to look at verse 7. Proverbs 22:7. And this has to do with planning ahead. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower becomes the lender's slave. So when you take on a loan, when you take out a loan, you are in some way a slave to the person who holds that loan. So, a car loan or a house loan. Now, there's reasons why getting a loan is a good idea. One of the most basic is very few people can afford to buy a car outright or afford to buy a house outright. So it's not necessarily evil, it's not wicked to get a loan. But what if in my position, who I am, and my salary, my obligations, my finances, I think I want to buy a boat to go on Winnipesaukee. I want one of those mahogany boats from the Chris Craft or something or other, They're like 140,000. Wouldn't that be nice? Well, it might be nice, but that's a very stupid idea. That's way out of my league. When am I going to run it? When am I going to go over and ride around on Winnipesaukee in a mahogany boat? Yeah, what is it, 271 now I see in town. It's going up, isn't it? Well, that's a toy. It's a very expensive toy. And I'm going to take out a loan to do that? That's a very foolish loan. And so plan ahead. Think ahead about this. Do pay your bills. Go to Proverbs 3. Proverbs 3. And look at verse 27. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due when it is in your power to do it. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will give it when you have it with you. There's a little bit of deceptiveness there. And there's also this idea of why put off paying your bill? Why put it off? If you have the ability to pay your bill, then pay your bill. So do pay your bills. Here's another question to ask. Are you generally conservative or are you consumptive? The word conserve means to save. You hold on, you save it, you're careful. Consumptive means you consume. You eat it up. You're always looking for more. And that's a good question to ask. So in Proverbs 21 and verse 17, Proverbs 21, look at verse 17. Here's an interesting verse. He who loves pleasure will become a poor man. He who loves wine and oil will not become rich. Interesting. Why wine and oil?
Because you're a drinker and a carouser, and it's
Yeah.
kind of like the other chapters of Proverbs where he's just kind of warning.
Yeah. Luxury items. You like the finest things, and it's like somebody who, some people can afford it, and if they can afford it, fine. It's their money. If they want to buy, a German luxury car or some high-end SUV, well, okay, that's fine. But that costs money. And if you could buy a Honda or a Toyota instead of a BMW or an Audi, and would it run okay? Well, generally yes. And so it's good to think through what kind of a person am I with my spending habits? Am I careful? Do I think it through? Do I ask the question, do I really need this, or do I just want it? And if the answer is, well, I just want it, then how about if you let it go? Ask yourself the same question in a month. And if you say, boy, I really want that, it's really going to help me out, well, then buy it. But if a month went by and you didn't say, I really need that thing, then you don't need it. It's kind of like papers on your desk. They say if you haven't read a paper or used a paper in a certain amount of time, then you're not going to read it. So Rachel's been helping me clean the critical mass over in the other room. Charlene was commenting on it. I like the SFM because every year it reminds me it's time to haul out 14 tons of pasture piles. Warren knows about pasture piles too. And it's time to clear out all that debris, all those articles that I saved. So I'm going to read that. That's going to be very helpful. Okay, so they've been sitting in that same pile for 3 years. How helpful were they? Well, not so much yet. So Rachel was functioning as my conscience today, whispering in my ear, Dad, have you read it yet? No, but I will. She said, if you haven't read it yet, when are you going to read it? I don't know. In the wastebasket it goes. Okay, well, back to this. Conservative versus consumptive. Invest in people. Go to Proverbs 19. Proverbs 19, verse 17. Invest in people means think about others. Think about how you could use your money to help somebody else. And here it is in verse 17. One who is gracious to a poor man lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his good deed. This is a principle that runs through the whole Bible. You can find it Old Testament, New Testament, Gospels, epistles, everywhere. Invest in people. Don't just be about yourself, and don't just be about stuff. Be about people. Think about how you can help somebody else. And so invest in the lives of others. And then finally, go to Proverbs chapter 3 and look at verse 9. Proverbs 3 and verse 9. It says, honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce. And this lesson is give to God. There's been a debate down through the centuries, should you tithe on your net or your gross? Should you tithe on, say, the whole paycheck, even though union dues, Uncle Sam, all those other things take a divot out of it? Okay. I've heard it a couple times actually. A preacher, I don't remember who now, a long time ago, and his question was this. I think it's a legitimate question. Do you want God to bless the gross or the net? Do you want God's blessing on the net or the gross? And anybody who's thinking of it would say, well, I'd like him to bless the whole thing, the gross. Even though Uncle Sam takes out some, and some goes out for union dues, and some goes out for this and that, before I even get the money. But nonetheless, I did earn that money. I remember one of the areas. Remember, I went to India several years ago with Alan, and just casually in a message somewhere, I mentioned tithing, and some of the church people came up to me afterward and said, "We're glad you talked about that because that's a weak area for our churches here in India." And they said our pastors are so under-supported. Sometimes the pastors can only be in the pastorate for a couple of years because they're going into poverty. And they said, I had people ask me this, this is very humbling to think about how prosperous we are and how we've been blessed. But they asked me, would it be okay if we tithed with rice? We've got bags of rice. Could we give that to the church, and that could be something that would help the pastor so that he'd have food? I said, absolutely. Tithe on rice. If you have 10 bags of rice, give the Lord one of them, and that will help your pastor be able to stay in the ministry. Well, give to God first, and God will honor that. Lori and I made the decision when we got married that we were going to tithe, and we always have, and we've tried to do more than that. And I can personally testify from my own experience. Our church in New York State was small, tiny, and there are many times, especially in the early years, where the treasurer would give me the paycheck on Sunday night, but say, please don't cash this until Tuesday, because that Sunday's offering was what we're going to live on. And we had little kids, and the church was not able to pay us a lot of money. They were, as good as they could, but it was tough times in a small church. And there were 2 times when the cupboards were just about like Mother Hubbard's. And I think I remember that there was a can of oatmeal, and that was it for 3 or 4 little kids. And I'm thinking, and this is like Tuesday, and we get paid on Sunday, and then we can get more food on next Tuesday. And I'm thinking, okay, Lord, I'm not sure how this works, but I'm trusting in you. That afternoon, a church member showed up with 2 bags of groceries. And he said, I was grocery shopping, and I thought you could use some groceries. Well, he didn't know. I didn't tell him. Lori didn't tell him. He didn't know. But God prompted that man to bring us food, and we ate it that night. Well, I can tell you from my own experience, God never lets you down. He never, ever lets you down. And if you put God first, He will honor that. He will supply the need. Questions or comments on money from Proverbs?
One thing I think that's really humbling is when you think that we are so fortunate to be born into this country with all its
Yeah.
riches, and we can learn about God and
Yes.
praise the Lord.
Yes.
And in other countries, they're born into such poverty.
Oh. Yeah, can you even imagine? I've wondered before, what made God decide for me to be born in the United States of America to a loving home, Christian family, a dad and mom that love God. And I could have been born in Bangladesh, I could have been born in Afghanistan. And I might never even hear about Jesus. Or I could have been born in such poverty where, a bowl of rice looks like a banquet. But instead, I've had all I could eat for my whole life. It's just God's grace, that's for sure. And we ought to be appreciative. Yep. Other comments? Money. Take your prayer bulletins, please. Let me share with you some things that are going on. We sure do want to pray for the Striving for the Mastery Conference, and here are some highlights that I would recommend praying for tonight and the next couple of days. Preparation and travel for all the speakers. So speakers are no doubt looking over their notes. Some of them have PowerPoint